Postmodern Condition by Jean-François Lyotard. 11. Research and its legitimation through performativity. Let us return to science and begin by examining the pragmatics of research. Its essential mechanisms are presently undergoing two important changes: a multiplication in methods of argumentation and a rising complexity level in the process of establishing proof. Aristotle, Descartes, and John Stuart Mill, among others, attempted to lay down the rules governing how a denotative utterance can obtain its addressee's assent. Scientific research sets no great store by these methods. As already stated, it can and does use methods, the demonstrative properties of which seem to challenge classical reason. Lyotard compiled a list of them, and it is already incomplete. These languages are not employed haphazardly, however. Their use is subject to a condition we could call pragmatic. Each must formulate its own rules and petition the addressee to accept them. To satisfy this condition, an axiomatic is defined that includes a definition of symbols to be used in the proposed language. A description of the form expressions in the language must take in order to gain acceptance, and an enumeration of the operations that may be performed on the accepted expressions. But how do we know what an axiomatic should or does in fact contain? The conditions listed above are formal conditions. There has to be a meta-language to determine whether a given language satisfies the formal conditions of an axiomatic. That meta-language is logic. At this point, a brief clarification is necessary. The alternative between someone who begins by establishing an axiomatic and then uses it to produce what are defined as acceptable statements, and a scientist who begins by establishing and stating facts, and then tries to discover the axiomatics of the language he used in making his statements, is not a logical alternative, but only an empirical one. It is certainly of great importance for the researcher, and also for the philosopher, but in each case the question of the validation of statements remains. The following question is more pertinent to legitimation. By what criteria does the logician define the properties required of an axiomatic? Is there a model for scientific languages? If so, is there just one? Is it verifiable? The properties generally required of the syntax of a formal system are consistency, syntactic completeness, decidability, and the independence of the axioms in relation to one another. Now, Gödel has effectively established the existence in the arithmetic system of a proposition that is neither demonstrable nor refutable within that system. This entails that the arithmetic system fails to satisfy the condition of completeness. Since it is possible to generalize this situation, it must be accepted that all formal systems have internal limitations. This applies to logic. The meta-language it uses to describe an artificial language is natural or everyday language. That language is universal, since all other languages can be translated into it, but it is not consistent with respect to negation. It allows the formation of paradoxes. This necessitates a reformulation of the question of the legitimation of knowledge. When a denotative statement is declared true, there is a presupposition that the axiomatic system within which it is decidable and demonstrable has already been formulated, that it is known to the interlocutors, and that they have accepted that it is as formally satisfactory as possible. This was the spirit in which the mathematics of the Bourbaki group was developed. But analogous observations can be made for the other sciences. They owe their status to the existence of a language whose rules of functioning cannot themselves be demonstrated, but are the object of a consensus among experts. These rules, or at least some of them, are requests. The request is a modality of prescription. The argumentation required for a scientific statement to be accepted is thus subordinated to a first acceptance of the rules defining the allowable means of argumentation. Two noteworthy properties of scientific knowledge result from this: the flexibility of its means, that is, the plurality of its languages, and its character as a pragmatic game. The acceptability of the moves made in it depends on a contract drawn between the partners. Another result is that there are two different kinds of progress in knowledge. One corresponds to a new move within the established rules, the other to the invention of new rules. In other words, a change to a new game. Obviously, a major shift in the notion of reason accompanies this new arrangement. The principle of a universal meta-language is replaced by the principle of a plurality of formal and axiomatic systems capable of arguing the truth of denotative statements. These systems are described by a meta-language that is universal but not consistent. What used to pass as paradox and even paralogism in the knowledge of classical and modern science can, in certain of these systems, acquire a new force of conviction and win the acceptance of the community of experts. The language game method I have followed here can claim a modest place in this current of thought. The other fundamental aspect of research, the production of proof, takes us in quite a different direction. It is in principle part of an argumentation process designed to win acceptance for a new statement. But it presents a special problem. It is here that the referent is called to the stand and cited in the debate between scientists. I have already made the point that the question of proof is problematical since proof needs to be proven. One can begin by publishing a description of how the proof was obtained, so other scientists can check the result by repeating the same process. But the fact still has to be observed in order to stand proven. What constitutes a scientific observation? A fact that has been registered by an eye, an ear, a sense organ. Senses are deceptive, and their range and powers of discrimination are limited. This is where technology comes in. Technical devices originated as prosthetic aids for the human organs, or as physiological systems whose function it is to receive data or condition the context. They follow a principle, and it is the principle of optimal performance, maximizing output and minimizing input. Technology is therefore a game pertaining not to the true, the just, or the beautiful, but to efficiency. A technical move is good when it does better and or expends less energy than another. This definition of technical competence is a late development. For a long time, inventions came in fits and starts, the products of chance research, or research as much or more concerned with the arts than with knowledge. The Greeks of the classical period, for example, established no close relationship between knowledge and technology. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the work of perspectors was still a matter of curiosity and artistic innovation. This was the case until the end of the 18th century, and it can be maintained that even today, wildcat activities of technical invention, sometimes related to bricolage, still go on outside the imperatives of scientific argumentation. Nonetheless, the need for proof becomes increasingly strong as the pragmatics of scientific knowledge replaces traditional knowledge or knowledge based on revelation. By the end of the Discourse on Method, Descartes is already asking for laboratory funds. A new problem appears: devices that optimize the performance of the human body for the purpose of producing proof require additional expenditures. No money, no proof, and that means no verification of statements and no truth. The games of scientific language become the games of the rich, in which whoever is wealthiest has the best chance of being right. An equation between wealth, efficiency, and truth is thus established. What happened at the end of the 18th century, with the first industrial revolution, is that the reciprocal of this equation was discovered. No technology without wealth, but no wealth without technology. A technical apparatus requires an investment, but since it optimizes the efficiency of the task to which it is applied, it also optimizes the surplus value derived from this improved performance. All that is needed is for the surplus value to be realized. In other words, for the product of the task performed to be sold. And the system can be sealed in the following way. A portion of the sale is recycled into a research fund dedicated to further performance improvement. It is at this precise moment that science becomes a force of production. In other words, a moment in the circulation of capital. It was more the desire for wealth than the desire for knowledge that initially forced upon technology the imperative of performance improvement and product realization. The organic connection between technology and profit preceded its union with science. Technology became important to contemporary knowledge only through the mediation of a generalized spirit of performativity. Even today, progress in knowledge is not totally subordinated to technological investment. Capitalism solves the scientific problem of research funding in its own way, directly by financing research departments in private companies, in which demands for performativity and recommercialization orient research first and foremost toward technological applications, and indirectly by creating private, state, or mixed sector research foundations that grant program subsidies to university departments, research laboratories, and independent research groups, with no expectation of an immediate return on the results of the work. This is done on the theory that research must be financed at a loss for a certain length of time in order to increase the probability of its yielding a decisive and therefore highly profitable innovation. Nation-states, especially in their Keynesian period, follow the same rule: applied research on the one hand, basic research on the other. They collaborate with corporations through an array of agencies. The prevailing corporate norms of work management spread to the applied science laboratories: hierarchy, centralized decision-making, teamwork, calculation of individual and collective returns, the development of saleable programs, market research, and so on. Centers dedicated to pure research suffer from this less, but also receive less funding. The production of proof, which is in principle only part of an argumentation process designed to win agreement from the addressees of scientific messages, thus falls under the control of another language game, in which the goal is no longer truth, but performativity, that is, the best possible input-output equation. The state and/or company must abandon the idealist and humanist narratives of legitimation in order to justify the new goal. In the discourse of today's financial backers of research, the only credible goal is power. Scientists, technicians, and instruments are purchased not to find truth, but to augment power. The question is to determine what the discourse of power consists of, and if it can constitute a legitimation. At first glance, it is prevented from doing so by the traditional distinction between force and right, between force and wisdom. In other words, between what is strong, what is just, and what is true. I referred to this incommensurability earlier in terms of the theory of language games, when I distinguished the denotative game from the prescriptive game from the technical game. Force appears to belong exclusively to the last game, the game of technology. I am excluding the case in which force operates by means of terror. This lies outside the realm of language games, because the efficacy of such force is based entirely on the threat to eliminate the opposing player, not on making a better move than he. Whenever efficiency is derived from a say or do this, or else you'll never speak again, then we are in the realm of terror, and the social bond is destroyed. But the fact remains that since performativity increases the ability to produce proof, it also increases the ability to be right. The technical criterion, introduced on a massive scale into scientific knowledge, cannot fail to influence the truth criterion. The same has been said of the relationship between justice and performance. The probability that an order would be pronounced just was said to increase with its chances of being implemented, which would in turn increase with the performance capability of the prescriber. This led Luhmann to hypothesize that in post-industrial societies, the normativity of laws is replaced by the performativity of procedures. Context control, in other words, performance improvement won at the expense of the partner, or partners constituting that context, can pass for a kind of legitimation, de facto legitimation. This procedure operates within the following framework. Since reality is what provides the evidence used as proof in scientific argumentation, and also provides prescriptions and promises of a juridical, ethical, and political nature with results, one can master all of these games by mastering reality. This procedure operates within the following framework. Since reality is what provides the evidence used as proof in scientific argumentation, and also provides prescriptions and promises of a juridical, ethical, and political nature with results, one can master all of these games by mastering reality. That is precisely what technology can do. By reinforcing technology, one reinforces reality, and one's chances of being just and right increase accordingly. Reciprocally, technology is reinforced all the more effectively if one has access to scientific knowledge and decision-making authority. This is how legitimation by power takes shape. Power is not only good performativity, but also effective verification and good verdicts. It legitimates science and the law on the basis of their efficiency, and legitimates this efficiency on the basis of science and law. It is self-legitimating, in the same way a system organized around performance maximization seems to be. Now it is precisely this kind of context control that a generalized computerization of society may bring. The performativity of an utterance, be it denotative or prescriptive, increases proportionally to the amount of information about its referent one has at one's disposal. Thus, the growth of power and its self-legitimation are now taking the rote of data storage and accessibility in the operativity of information. The relationship between science and technology is reversed. The complexity of the argumentation becomes relevant here, especially because it necessitates greater sophistication in the means of obtaining proof, and that in turn benefits performativity. Research funds are allocated by states, corporations, and nationalized companies in accordance with this logic of power growth. Research sectors that are unable to argue that they contribute even indirectly to the optimization of the system's performance are abandoned by the flow of capital and doomed to senescence. The criterion of performance is explicitly invoked by the authorities to justify their refusal to subsidize certain research centers